Hi, Dr. Rao. Good afternoon. My name is Esha, and I'm a high school student interested in being a veterinarian. I'm so excited to welcome you to the interview series on the careers of veterinarians. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me start with an introduction of our speaker. Our speaker today is Dr. Deepa Rao, a board-certified toxicologist and veterinary pathologist with over 20 years of experience in the translation of chemical or drug toxicology data from animal studies to human health risk assessment. Dr. Rao received her veterinary degree from the Mysore Veterinary College in India in 1992, her PhD in toxicology from the University of Oklahoma in 2000, and completed her pathology residency training from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the National Toxicology Program at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences in North Carolina. Dr. Rao has work experience as a toxicologist and as a pathologist, having served as a study director in preclinical toxicology at Covance Laboratories, as a toxicological pathologist for the National Toxicology Program, as a regulatory toxicologist for the Food and Drug Administration, and as a bench neuropathologist at Tox Path Specialists. Dr. Rao continues to work as a toxicologist neuropathologist during Greenfield Pathology Services, Inc., with a focus in regulatory neurotoxicologic evaluations. Dr. Rao's recognized expertise in the field is evident through her numerous lectures, publications, awards, invited manuscript reviews, and participation in the National Toxicology Program pathology working groups and the FDA advisory committees. She currently serves as a counselor within the executive committees for the Society of Toxicologic Pathology. Dr. Rao is actively engaged in professional education outreach activities through the Society of Toxicologic Pathology, the International Academy of Toxicologic Pathology, to the global community of toxicologic pathologists, as well as partnering with the local communities groups that support science education to children. With this introduction, let me extend a warm welcome and thank you to Dr. Rao for chatting with me today.
Thank you, Esha. Thank you for the kind introduction. That was a long one.
So first, could you tell us about the various types of work that you have done? Feel free to share your screen and show any pictures or slides that you would like.
Yeah, so various kinds of work that I've done spans a period of a crossover almost about 30 years. And I think it might be easiest if I share my screen over here. So I'm going to move over to share. And I have just one slide, but it is a slide that covers my career path over the time I started veterinary school. So I went to veterinary school in India, and it's a 5-year program in India. It's 13 trimesters and a 6-month internship. So I completed that in 92, and it was traditional. I just wanted to be a veterinarian and be a surgeon, and I was interested in surgery and was thinking about doing my master's in surgery. And but it was also a period of time where there was a lot of folks that were applying to study and pursue higher education, doing their master's and their doctorate work. And so I decided to give that a shot. And so I applied in several universities, and I got accepted at a couple in the US, and I ended up going to Oklahoma State University. And that's where I got my master's degree. And I specialized in anatomy at the time. It took about 3 years to complete, and I used to teach anatomy. And when you teach anatomy, of all things, because it involves a lot of nomenclature and these hard to pronounce names, and you never want to do it again. And so I couldn't believe that I was teaching anatomy, did that for about 3 years and said no more of anatomy, and wanted to switch into something different. And at the time, there was a professor that came out to give a lecture series at the university, and he was working at the University of Oklahoma. And he was an endowed chair. He was from Hopkins, and he'd set up this whole program in toxicology. So I decided that I was really interested in what he talked about, which was about hearing loss. And he seemed to be doing some good research. I ended up visiting with him and then interviewing with him, and ended up completing my PhD program with him. He turned out to be one of my best mentors. And I've had so many mentors, and all of them are great. But this one especially nurtured me from all through graduate school, and I'm still in touch with him. So I got my PhD in toxicology, and after that I did a couple of postdocs, which are fellowships where you do more research and get an understanding of how research works. And then I realized that I actually liked research. So it was having to balance between practicing as a veterinarian versus research. And I thought, wow, this research stuff actually has some interesting things about it. So I got hooked onto it and completed a couple of postdocs, and then decided, okay, I wanted to go into academia, but unfortunately I developed allergies to the critters. So it was hard to imagine myself working in in a lab doing research and not being able to interact with the animals. So then I pursued a postdoctoral position at, after I finished these two postdocs, I decided to go into industry for a little bit. So I worked at Covance Laboratories, which was focused on toxicology. And over there, I worked as a study director for a few years. And for a couple of years, actually. And that's when I realized I understand the process of drug development, and it's so complex, and there are different kinds of scientists, and everyone's interacting with each other, and it sounds really interesting. And that's where I got an exposure to pathology. And so being a veterinarian, it allowed me to, it opened up more career choices in that I could also do pathology. So I served as a toxicologist at Covance, but then I also saw the pathologists working at Covance and decided to complement my career with also pathology. It was mainly because of I was just curious about it. And a position did open up locally within the University of Wisconsin, the School of Veterinary Medicine, and I interacted with another great mentor who helped me through by making the right decisions for careers. And I ended up doing a residency in pathology at the University of Wisconsin, at the vet school there, which was a fabulous experience. And so having both toxicology and pathology, one thing that I've managed to keep as a base throughout my career is being able to work in the field of neuroscience. So everything neuro was always attractive to me, even as a high schooler. I just was fascinated by the way the brain works and things like that. So I sort of kept that theme along, because even for my graduate school, I studied hearing loss and the chemicals that were affecting hearing and things that were causing hearing loss. And then for one of my postdocs, I looked at the inhalation system. So we're looking at the how we smell and the sort of chemical exposures that we have via inhalation and what sort of damage that may potentially cause. So these are all the different things where I try to keep the neuro in focus. So after I finished both toxicology and pathology, it seemed like my focus would be in the neuro area. So I started focusing on neuropathology. And so after my residency, I worked at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, the National Toxicology Program, and spent a few years over there working as a pathologist and with a focus in neuropathology. But then, you keep doing all this neuropathology and you wonder, it's like, what does all this mean? Like, I'm looking at these lesions under the microscope, I'm looking at these, I'm diagnosing these, but how is it actually helping, and how does the whole circle fit? And so I went back and I worked as a toxicologist. The thing is about toxicology and pathology is that they're very, very closely interlinked. And, we try to separate them and give them different professional titles and jobs and everything like that. But in essence, when it comes down to the science of it, they're very, very closely interlinked with each other. So I had to do toxicology to understand how pathology fits into the world of toxicology. So I went back to being a toxicologist at the Food and Drug Administration, and that was where I learned about risk assessment, which was absolutely fascinating. It was realistic. It was looking at drugs and looking at safety and looking how drugs for the first time when they are being dosed in humans, like what is the safe level that you can test in humans. So this is all about drug safety and chemical safety. And having worked as a toxicologist for a few years there, I moved on to, I wanted to come back and work with the microscope. So I came back to neuropathology, and I worked at Tox Path Specialists, which was focused on neuropath, which then merged into another company called Stage Bio. And then eventually I'm more on a semi-independent position now with Greenfield Pathology Services, where I focus on just neuropathology. So I look at the neurotoxicology and neuropathology aspect evaluation for chemicals and drugs that are impacting public health. So the overlying picture is that it has to do with public health. So with that, I am going to stop presenting this slide, and then you can ask me questions.
That was very motivating and very interesting. Now, I'm curious, which has been more valuable in your career, your education or your experience?
You know, that is a really good question, Esha. I like to say that the experience matters more. But I've realized in the real world that education and the credentials also matter. You can get your way in a practicing real world without the education, just with the experience, but you might end up being one of the few people. So the probability of being a successful veterinarian or a successful veterinary scientist is to combine both. It's not impossible to rely just on education, just on experience, and have a very successful career, but you'll probably be one of the very few people. There are many ways to complement your career, but I think sometimes credentials do matter, because when you sign reports and when you sign things that impact public health, the public wants to be certain that a person who has experience and training is the person who has evaluated this, all the data that goes with it. And the way they do that is with the education and training. Now, that said, I will say that education and training alone is also not the be all and end all, because you really need the experience. So I would say both of them. You have to have both of them, and it's strategizing to balance how much of this versus how much of something else.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's very helpful to know. Could you give me an idea about the key value sets, personal attributes, and soft skills that make veterinarians successful?
Yes. So not necessarily just for veterinarians, but I think anyone in general looking to be a professional. The things, especially for someone in the biological sciences, one of the biggest things as a scientist is to remain curious, is to go with the things that are attractive to you. You want to understand more about something, so you lean in and you learn. So I think staying curious is probably one of the biggest things. What other soft skills? There are plenty of other soft skills, but I think a balance of being focused, being disciplined, and also just having fun. I think the curiosity sort of comes in with having fun. So you have to go with your gut, because you have to make those decisions as in, what is it that I'm going to be doing that I like for 8, 10, 12 hours a day and not feel frustrated by it. So I think money isn't everything. It is something. But after a certain point, it really doesn't matter. So I would encourage young folks to pursue a career that's fulfilling and enriching. We are all professionals. As a veterinarian, we are making choices between being a scientist or a practicing veterinarian. These are all good choices. So we'll all meet our baselines of fulfilling financial obligations, but there's got to be something a little more. So I'd say let your curiosity drive you.
Yeah, that is very good advice. May I ask, is there anything you wish you knew while you were in vet school about other career paths?
Ooh, did I wish I knew about them? You know, that is a hard question because you don't know what you don't know. And when I started veterinary medicine, I had a choice of getting into architecture, dental school, medical school, which my parents were very disappointed that I did not choose to do. But I went with being a veterinarian. And I think in retrospect, it's been the best decision. But knowing how to strategize your career is something that you need to be aware of all along the way. For me, it was neuro. I love neuroscience. I love to learn more about how the brain works, how it responds to chemicals, how it responds to drugs, that sort of thing. So you keep a theme. And as you progress in your career, you try to make those decisions that keep coming back to what you really love. So I think when you love, for me, I love neuroscience. Even when I was working in areas that were slightly away from neuroscience, I would try to find a way to come back to it. I would try to find, even if it was peripherally linked with it, I would still try to, grasp it. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. If I hadn't chosen to pursue a master's or a PhD and gone that route, I would have probably gone towards becoming a practicing veterinary surgeon. I love the idea of surgery. I love working with my hands. So I think that would have been an equally delightful career to have had. So I think it's balancing and trying to find out your options as you go along, because as you complete each milestone in your career, you're exposed to more opportunities. It's like, wow, I could do this. I could complement it with this. And one thing I would encourage is folks to complement their careers with different things, because there are not very many people who do that. We like to divide things up into little boxes and say, this is economics and this is science and this is engineering. But you can all these things in reality combine with each other. So I think for me, it was I combined toxicology and pathology, and they are both really very close. But I would encourage folks to combine things that are completely different, even things like pharmaceutical economics, global pharmaceutical economics. That is, why we're producing all these drugs. Why aren't drugs getting out to underdeveloped countries? What are the economics and the bottlenecks and the factors that go in there to understand that? So if you have a science background and then combine it with economics, you could be really successful too. So, I mean, just combining different things. So have a very open mind and strategize and talk to people. Try to identify people in different areas and visit with them and ask them how they got there. Just exactly what you're doing today. So.
Thank you. That is very helpful, and that's very great advice. Thank you so much for chatting with me today and sharing all this helpful information. You have enjoyed such an incredible career journey across different types of organizations, and I wish you continued success in your career.
Thank you so much, Esha, and I wish you the very best too. Stay in touch.